Cool. Let's get the ball rolling. Good evening, guys. I think the others will accept them as time goes. We're running out of time. We're scheduled for 1 hour tonight, and thank you so much for joining me. Those who don't know me, my name is Shili Boy Mutiwa. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I specialize in tax within property sector. I do estate planning, trust administrations, tax planning, legal planning with my partner, Bruno Sma. He's joining us today. We also do disease estates, will drafting, and administration. So that's Intergen that does. Another head, I'm a property developer on a part-time basis. I do that. I develop apartments and estate houses. That's what I'm busy with currently. So tonight I'm joined by I'm actually nervous to host this excellent, well-achieved individuals within property space. I've got my dear sister, Silindile Makumalo. Kunjani siswam? I'm all good. I'm all good. She did it all. I don't have to say much about what she did, but she did it all. You probably, most of you guys here are here because of the, sorry, Christian and Bruno, but I mean. And I've got my dear brother, Bruno. Bruno Semai is an attorney. He's a founder of Bruno Semai Attorneys. He's also my co-partner and my co-director at Intergen, where we do fiduciary services for property investors like yourself. If you need help, you know where to go when it comes to trust administrations and things like estate planning, which is very critical, and things like wills. You cannot be a property investor without a will. And I'm sure there's something that Bruno has for you guys, for those who are here. Bruno, I think he mentioned that he will share with you free gift. Do you want to jump in for 60 seconds and tell me what you have for them tonight?
Oh, absolutely. So just very quickly, not bore people. The coming up is Wills Week, which is an initiative by the Law Society of South Africa to try and ensure that as many people as possible have wills, that they understand what the implications are if they pass away without a will. It is very, very important because dying intestate, unfortunately nowadays, does land up being a disaster. There's a whole range of implications that are just simply not pleasant. Things, for example, as simple as appointing guardian for your children is vital, because sometimes if that's not taken care of, you leave it in the hands of courts and social workers and the master's office, and that is not the ideal scenario. So because of Wills Week, what we're doing is we are offering limited amount though, because we only have so much capacity, but we are doing free wills. I'll ask Shilly Boy to put up the link onto the group so people can access it. It is for a basic will, so it's nothing complicated, but it's just to give you something to go on. If you want something a bit more complicated, you're welcome to engage us and we can work something out, but at least just to get wills to people so they've got some level of protection. Click on the link, give us your information. We are limited, so the first, I think it's about the first 100 that can come through, we'd be able to accept. We have put this promotion out already, but yeah, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Bruno. During the sessions, I'll look for that link. I might have misplaced it, but then I'll look for it and I'll share it on the chat. Please check on it on the chat button there. I'll share with you guys the link that Bruno is mentioning, and then you can just fill there if you are looking for a will that Bruno is willing to give away. I'm sure Christian is here. Christian, are you here, my brother? Christian?
There we go.
There we go.
Just needed to unmute myself.
Oh, excellent. Guys, the fourth person on our session is Christian Johnson, my dear friend. He's a guy to go for financing, any financing assistance. If you need assistance when it comes to raising a finance for commercial, residential, and he can do a good justice by introducing himself before I say things.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me again, Shiliboy and Bruno. It's great to be here again, and also great to recognize a couple of names as I look at all the participants that are attending tonight. My name is Christian Janssen, and I'm a financing specialist with At360 Finance. And as Shiliboy mentioned, our whole focus is to help and secure financing and funding for all of our clients. My core client base is focused on property investors, and I go to all of the banks on your behalf to find you the best possible deal.
Thank you, Christian. I need to acknowledge my supporting structure. One of the guys that we started the platform with is Moshe. Moshe I'm not sure if he's already here. Thank you so much, Moshe, and for being there during the lockdown when we formulated the plan to assist our property investors on the way forward and ensuring that they preserve and they create and they transfer their wealth in a more efficient way. Guys, when we do investment structure, today's topic being around the property Stokvel, there are three principles that we always tell the property investors to pretty much take a cognizant of. And as a result, the three participants that are here today actually covers those principles. One of the key things when, as a property investor, you'll always concern yourself is with regard to asset protection. And this is where Bruno will actually, in relation to property Stokvel, will come into party. The second principle also being financing efficiency. How do you ensure that you structure your property Stokvel to ensure that you are easily accessing a finance? Because at some point, yes, you can do contributions on a monthly basis or whichever way you guys agree on doing the contribution towards your own Stokvel. But at some point, you need to attempt leveraging such equity to expand and make sure that you create that particular wealth. And I think this is where Silindile and Christian know better than me. And then there's a section, and the third principle being around tax efficiency. So those three principles as a property investor, you'll always attempt to ensure that you achieve them. And that's very, very important. But with that said, it's always quite a challenge. It's always a challenge to actually achieve what economists call equilibrium. There's always going to be a bit of imbalances there and there, but you always strive to ensure that you are at the equilibrium, managing those three principles. With that said, Silindile, how are you feeling about being one of the most successful property Stokvel founders in South Africa?
Hi, Shiliboy, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I don't know how I feel. I think it's really been it's been overwhelming, to say the least. The success that we've had in such a short amount of time, because I mean, we've only started around late last year, around July, and we've really managed to do really, really well in a very short space of time. And I think it speaks to, that we all know Stokvels in South Africa, and now we are just using property, which everybody also know. So we're really combining two very well-known and loved concepts within the South African concept, and I think people are taking a liking to that. And I think in the way that we've run the Stokvel, in terms of how we've initiated it, Bruno, who's on the call today, was the attorney that helped us with drafting the legal agreements. So we've really done everything that we could to make sure that we set the correct foundation and that we manage it properly. We manage our investors, we manage the funds correctly. There's a level of transparency and trust within our members that even last year we won the SA Property Investor of the Year as a Stokvel, so it really speaks to the fact that, the way Stokvels have been there around for a while, and even other property Stokvels have been there around, but just the way that we did them was really innovative to enable us to win that award. And also, during the lockdown, when most South Africans were worried about their futures, maybe their incomes were cut, was actually when our Stokvel really took off. Like, we really did a record amount of new members, record amount of new contributions between the period of March until July, when it was the peak of the lockdown. So it really just goes to show that, this is something that can really, really work if done correctly.
Thank you so much. You mentioned the issue of transparency, which is something close to my heart around the governance. Being SEA, ethics and morals come close to my heart. That's very good. But with that said, the motivation to setting up the Stokvel, what was it and how did you find it being aligned to the motivation of the guys joining you?
Okay, so from a personal perspective, I am a property investor, but I call myself a small scale property investor really, because I started out with like a small 1-bedroom unit, 2-bedroom unit. I'm not doing big developments like usually. So, and with those little properties that I had, I realized that, if I could buy 1 or 2 properties by myself, if we actually put more money together, we would be able to do a lot more than what I was able to do on my own. So that was the motivation behind actually looking at the whole Stokvel thing, to say, what can we actually do when we put more money together and put it into something like property? So that is when the whole property seed was planted, to say, if we all just put in 2,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand, whatever the case might be, how much would we be able to do and how much scale would we be able to achieve, rather than just me doing it on my own. So that was really the motivation, to say, what would it actually be possible if we did that? And so since Sakesiso started last year, like in July, like I said to you earlier, we've raised 6 million Rand, just over 6 million Rand. And that is no easy, feat, considering that, they're saying South Africans have a culture of not saving. They're saying that there's so many bad stories about Stokvels in South Africa. And we've actually proven that, maybe it's to do with not the right products, or maybe the way that the messages are being relayed to people is not right, or something along those lines, because our members are fairly consistent with their contributions. And to part with 2,500 Rand a month it's not easy, and people have been contributing regularly and even reinvesting their payouts. And so the pool just gets bigger and bigger exponentially. So it just goes to show that this is something that really that South Africans have been waiting for, and that this is now possible through to invest in property through vehicles like property Stokvels.
That's good. And you mentioned the issue of a strong foundation when you started this Stokvel. Bruno, you are part of the, what do I call, a power team. You are part of the think tank behind Slindile. How has it been a journey, and the constitution when you drafted, what is that key clause that you think is one of the cornerstone that might have assisted them to be where they are? I think you're on mute, Bruno.
Yeah. Sorry, that was an admin thing. I wasn't able to unmute myself.
No problem.
So just to kind of support what Silindile was talking about, the thing is, a lot of property investors are going out there desperate to find funding and financing, and the reality is and it's not something that Christian's not involved in, because in fact people like Christian can actually bring things to the party. And the way that we can construct these type of Stokvels, remember, at the end of the day, the concept of a Stokvel is very indigenous to South Africa. It was created around a certain concept of being able to share resources. But now the reality is it really indigenous to South Africa? Because I know, for example, in Scandinavian countries, very similar concepts. Like if you look at the where insurance, the concept of insurance developed, it was actually based on the idea that if people pool funds together, they're almost able to underwrite bad events because they'd have enough money to cover the happening of a singular bad event. So concepts like pulling money together for a common purpose has been around for generations and centuries. What Silindile managed to do is be able to look at it and go, well, the bottom line is I want to be able to source money from people, but now we're going out and asking people for 500,000 and 200,000. Why not ask for slightly lower amounts and make it more sustainable. Now, the trick behind it from a legal perspective, and this is something that Silindile and myself debated for ages, is the problem is you also don't want a situation where you have too many people in a Stokvel and no decisions can actually be made. Because that's also now one of the downsides. Is it's great to say, well, everyone puts in a small amount and we go out and we invest and it helps the community. But does it? Because one person's going to want to invest in Roodepoort, the other person wants to invest in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. And that is where the legalities kind of came in and played a part. So to answer your question, what's fundamental? What's fundamental is having the investment model in place so you know exactly what you're trying to achieve. We can take a company and we can put 100 shareholders in the company if we want to. As long as we've predefined what the company is supposed to be doing and people know. So there's almost like a prospectus, if you want to put it like that, of a clear vision so that the management of the company isn't necessarily left in the hands of each individual person. And I think that is where we have to kind of distinguish ourselves from the Stokvels that we know and love as South Africans, because a Stokvel of 10 people that are family members and each puts in a little money every month, they get to speak about how they're going to use that money. And it's almost democracy in its most a basic or fundamental sense. But once you're looking at raising money for property, it's not 10 people anymore. It's 100, it's 1,000, it's 4,000 people. What do you do then? And unfortunately, there we have to actually look more along what do our corporates do as opposed to what do our Stokvels do. Decisions being made have to be left in the hands of capable people. So the Stokvels contributors almost need to look and go, who can we trust and mandate our money to, that we won't constantly have to look over their shoulder to ask, but what are you doing now? Can we give a clear, defined, transparent mandate on what we expect and who can carry out that mandate? We can fire them if they don't, but we need someone that can actually pull the trigger when we want them to pull the trigger. And I think that's where Silindile came in quite successfully, because she could pull the trigger. She knew what she was doing, and she rallied people to be able to say, but you can trust me to do it because I've been doing this for a while, and you can fire me if I make a mistake. And up until now, she's still running it successfully. So I'm guessing that's never really been an issue for anyone.
And she has been amazing. And Christian, to bring you on, Stokvel has been, how do I put it? Traditional banking system has always not inclined towards what you call Stokvels. And in recent times, I see that banks have been sort of softening up towards people like Silindile. In your experience, I mean, you deal a lot with property investors. There might be structuring Stokvel. You work it closely with Silindile. What has been the experience in recent years? You're muted. Yeah, there we go.
Cool. No, I'll just keep on muting myself if I'm not talking to not disrupt. So it's just something to keep an eye on from your side, Chili Boy. So the banks are becoming a little bit more progressive with it, but ultimately the main consideration comes down to it being a pooling of funds. So there's no definite earnings that's really allowing qualification for financing. So at this point in time, most of the purchases, especially if you're looking at residential properties, will have to be done cash. When you start moving towards commercial property finance, the banks will look at it differently. Alternatively, if you have one or two of the members standing surety and providing bond qualification, you can leverage the cash from the other members. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation still from the bank's point of view. But once the portfolio has repayment ability, it does also allow for greater qualification. But on a smaller scale, I've seen instances where up to 10 people form a company together. Only 4 of them are directors, but they physically have to apply and qualify for financing. So everybody's pooling funds to build the portfolio, but only a couple of guys are applying for financing. But on a much larger scale, like what Silindile is doing, most of that is done cash. Or can you add to that, Silindile?
Sure, Christian. So unfortunately, that's the reality that Stokvels in nature are not really like legal entities. So we can't, for example, we have like, I think 220 members as it stands. There's just no way like 220 of us will go and apply for a bond. It's just not feasible. So that is why a particular structure or entity needs to be set up if the Stokvel decides that they want to purchase a property. So either a trust or a company. So that's where Shiliboy and Bruno would then come into play to say which entity would enable the Stokvel to be able to access the funding, depending on, you know, the size, the complexity, what it is that they're trying to achieve, and then the proper vehicle would then be set up for that Stokvel to gain access to funding.
Thank you, guys. With that said, I saw that link I shared with you guys on the chat box. So if you need that free will, please go look into that chat box and then use that link. And then I think the office will be in contact with you for a free will. It's free basic will, as Bruno said. So I'm opening a floor. Our platform is a group consultation, AKA group consultation. We don't do presentation. You get out of here with your questions answered. So for an order, let's raise hands if you've got any question, and then the guys are here. You can ask as many questions as you can. I'm not sure if okay, yeah, guys, you can unmute. If you wanna ask a question, please raise your hand, and then we'll take it from there. Slee, what are how can I put this question? Let me put it this way. When someone joins Stokvel, they've got expectations, right? And like Bruno said, he created some sort of a document in such a way, some sort of a prospectus that will be, someone needs to subscribe to that. But we know people are actually, they've got their own expectations, and then some documents might be in place, but then, you know, some things up, they raise certain questions. How have you been dealing with misalignment of expectations and prospectus?
I really don't know. I don't know if we do a really good job of explaining our model or what it is, but because we do like webinars, and we do like before lockdown, we used to do like physical info sessions where we're not just handing someone a document. You know, we actually explaining in detail how it works, understand the benefits, understand the risks, understand how it works, understand your role in the stocks and all those things. And also when you sign up, you then also then digitally accept the terms and conditions of the Stokvel. So you need to then say, I have read and I have accepted those terms and conditions. But we now and again, you'll have one or two people. Obviously, we can't have a Stokvel of this nature and everybody's 100% aligned. But to be quite honest with you, they're very few and far between who have come up and said, no, I was sold a lie, or this, or whatever the case might be. I think even because what happens is that we have info sessions, we have webinars. You know, we attended the property show last year in Durban and in Joburg. So we there, you ask us the questions until you make sure you understand. You then have an option. We use an app called Stokvel. So you sign up there, you can review the constitution on Stokvel, and then you then digitally accept it. You know, so once you've done that as well, we give you a call once you've signed up, and we say, we see that you've signed up. Do you have any questions? Did you understand? So we just make sure that people are comfortable with what they're getting themselves into. And if there's anyone who's unhappy or unsatisfied, we have been always more than willing to refund them their money and say, if you're not happy with this model or this doesn't work for you, here's your money and you're more than welcome to go. Because we don't want disgruntled or unhappy members. If you maybe you didn't understand and you came in whatever, and you feel that this is not what you had in mind, we have had instances where we've refunded those members and they've exited. So but those are the exceptions. I think like we've only refunded 2 people in the time that we've been around. So it's very, very rare that people actually come and complain.
That's an excellent record. And that's a very excellent record. And it goes back to the innovation and innovative principle, what you said earlier, that you were quite innovative when you entered the space. I saw Bruno that raised the hand, and Tulani. I'll start with Tulani, and then I'll go to Bruno, and then is Timothy, and Norma after that. Tulani?
Thanks, Shilipoy. Thanks for the opportunity. My question goes to, I guess, to both Bruno and Slee. I'm just interested around the legalities of setting up a Stokvel. Of course, there are varied members that will be joining the entity, whether you set up a company or whatever the case may be. How do you deal with issues around individuals that are married in community of property versus others that are single? What's the best way to structure the company in such a way that the company is not affected if there is any sort of challenges or issues with somebody who is married and they go insolvent and so forth? Thanks.
Thank you, Tulani. I think Bruno, you can take this.
Cool. No, thanks so much. And thank you for giving me the hard question. I appreciate that. It's good on you. So, and as I mentioned before, because the concept of Stokvel it's not a formalized concept. It's anything that we need it to be. It means that structuring it can be anything that you need it to be as an individual. So, for instance, you can decide to have a company and hand out shareholding in that company. Simple as that. And that's a formal process. And then every individual is a shareholder. Now, your question when it comes to that relating to like possible divorces and married in community of property, the companies in terms of which you own shares aren't really impacted by who the shareholder is and what happens to the shares. So the shares sit in that joint estate, and whatever happens to them, those shares stay in there. And as far as the company is concerned, it keeps running without impact on the shareholders, without there being any issue. So the problem that we experienced is the fact that if there's constant contributions, because there's a difference now, sometimes people make one big lump sum contribution and that's it. And sometimes people have to make consistent monthly contributions. And that's the problem when it comes to having this shareholding and expecting constant contributions every month. Different ways of doing it. So you can do it as a normal Stokvel without even a company. And then the Stokvel lends money, to example, to a company. And that company actually goes and invests in the property, owns the property, and the Stokvel is basically lending the money, or you can have certain shareholding, but a lot of the times you'll see lenders. And what happens in those circumstances is the informal Stokvel has its own rules with regarding constant contributions. And if a contribution is stopped, it gets dealt with in a number of ways. I mean, I've seen Stokvels that force like a forfeiture. I've seen Stokvels that change the ratio and say, well, you've only contributed X amount. So when profits do come in, you're only going to get 75% of what you're supposed to get. I've seen Stokvels that penalize and say, well, if you stop, because you're not supposed to stop before you get to this amount. So if you do stop, you'll be penalized and you'll get X back. So there's different ways of doing it, and that's according to preference. So you can get money back, you can continue sharing in the profits. Some very strict Stokvels might cause a forfeiture and you lose all the money you've put in. So those are all in the terms of the specific Stokvel. If you do it as a shareholder, so let's say each person contributes to a company to buy a property, what we normally suggest is every time a contribution is made, new shares are issued. So if you have, for example, let's say, for instance, you've got 100 people contributing and you issue 100 shares in month 1. Month 2, you issue 100 shares. Month 3, you issue 100 shares. Now, let's say in month 4, a couple of these people drop off and aren't contributing anymore. So let's say 10 of them don't contribute. That month, you'd only issue 90 new shares and you wouldn't issue those 10, meaning that certain people would have a higher shareholding than other people. And you could do it in that way, for example. So there's a whole bunch of ways of doing it, and it's all completely legitimized. And from a legal perspective, what's also very interesting is bringing Christian again into the mix. A lot of people have this concept that you're going to pool all the money together, you're going to build this up, and then you're going to go buy a property cash. And what we've realized from experience is you can pull this money together, and instead of buying one property for R1 million, you could buy 10 properties and use 100,000 Rand to pay a deposit on each one. But what Christian pointed out was, but then you need someone to actually go to the bank, apply apply for a loan, be able to get a loan, because you can do it in the name of the company, but it's always going to be up to that person's affordability. The amazing thing is there are people out there that will do that, because remember, the underlying asset has value. So it's not that risky for them. So they would be happy to have a company, the Stokvel lends the money, they go out, get a loan, have the property, get rental income, cover the bond payments, distribute to the Stokvel and repay it. And things like that can actually happen. All they need is the right incentive. And they need to make a little bit of profit. So it can be done. And you can actually leverage guys like Christian to make more money moving forward and to buy more properties rather.
Thank you so much, Bruno. It wasn't a difficult question. I knew you are more than capable of taking it on. Christian, to bring you into the equation, Bruno touched on the power of leverage. Do you want to maybe just extrapolate on that concept? Christian, you're muted.
There we go. I just first needed to get unmuted again. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've got many a way to approach that. When you're going to be leveraging financing from the banks, it's going to come down to getting the bond qualification in place, getting the suretyships in place to allow for financing. If it's going to be a commercial property, let's say the Stokvel pools money together to buy a block of flats, a smallish block, and the Stokvel contributes to the deposit and acquisition costs and all of that, and the banks finance the balance. That would be done in a separate entity. So Bruno will be the best person to chat to about the co-ownership structures and so forth to also make sure that everything works. But yeah, then you can quite easily get to a point where all of the members of the Stokvel will pool their money together to effect that acquisition. Similarly, so if that bond would have a shortfall as things stand, then you would have to place reliance on monthly contributions from the members to cover that.
Thank you so much, Christian. I hope you answered. Timothy? There we go.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm not sure if I understand the whole concept correctly, but as far as I understand is a group of people, let's say 10 people come together, pool money together and finance a property or so. So my question is, what if all those 10 people decide to pull out at once? How sustainable is it? Is it that not like too much of a risk to the whole?
Okay, I think I got it.
I can answer that one,
yes.
Timothy.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
gonna say Sili will answer that because you experienced that already with people exiting. Sili.
Okay. So in the Constitution, there needs to be some sort of provision because this is inevitable. So there's going to be two kinds of exit, right? So the one is a voluntary exit where someone says, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want out. So how does the Stokvel then handle a case like that? Then the second type of an exit is an involuntary exit. Like, for example, if you pass on, which unfortunately we've also had as Sakisi's, where we had one of our members pass on and we had to deal with that. So how do we handle a case like that? So in the instance of a voluntary exit, you need to have a criteria to say what happens if a person exits early. Do they forfeit, like Bruno was saying, do they forfeit everything, which I believe is a little bit unfair? Or do you say you wait until a particular period before you can get your funds out? You know, so those kinds of things you can put in place in your constitution to say, this is what happens if there's a voluntary exit. Or how do we then calculate what your share is at the point of exit? You know, if there's a physical property, to evaluate it and then calculate your share. How does that work? In the case of an involuntary exit, like for example, with the case of a member passing on, we had to make sure that we get all the relevant documents from the estate of the late member. We had to get a death certificate. We had to have a letter of authority to make sure that we pay into the correct, so that the right beneficiaries get it. Because, for example, that person, they just said, my relative has passed away, can we get her money back? And we're like, no, it doesn't work like that. We need to pay into the estate. So we need to have the letter of authority to make sure that we're handing over the funds of the member to the correct person. So those are some of the things things that we needed to put in place to say what happens if a member exits voluntary as well as involuntary. So the Stokvel Constitution would need to make provision for that.
You know, Slee, you touched on a very, very important thing here. Your member, had she or he not had kept records of her interest, probably some of the money would have been lost. And
Yes.
this is comes back to knowing people like Bruno and Intergen, who deals with estate planning, because they equally act as your executors to unwind your estate upon your death. So they will assist with keeping records and to ensure that should you pass away, your family don't lose your hard-earned wealth. But I shouldn't sound like I'm a salesperson now. Christian, in a case where such a key person has passed away and you find that they actually had been what you call stood as a surety for Stokvel financing with the bank, what happens?
Well, suretyship is completely separate to ownership. So if I stood surety for a couple of bonds, but I'm not one of the title holders, say for example, I'm a director of a company, but my shareholding is held in trust, then when I pass away, obviously the banks want to ensure that their security is there. But if I don't have any other relationship with that bank, and there's no mention of my passing on accounts of no accounts having to be wound up, nothing will change. So it will carry on. But similarly, so if you find yourself having access or having a relationship with that bank apart from that suretyship, they will more than likely call up and just ensure that the remaining sureties are able to remain surety and that the affordability is there. I've got an interesting example of that with my father having passed away. We were co-members of a CC, and initially he took out the bond in the name of the CC, stood surety, and speaking to Standard Bank about, well, finalizing the winding down of his estate, because I'm now the sole member of that CC, they actually told me that I need to pay full bond registration costs again in terms of doing substitution of debtor, which is complete. It's crazy in my opinion. I've got no relationship with them other than that, so I'm probably going to move the bond to another bank if I'm going to pay to switch it and save on interest rate, probably get a better one, but that's a completely different conversation. But yeah, if the banks are going to find that without that one surety, the repayment ability is in doubt, they're definitely going to demand a substitution of debtor, somebody coming in to also allow that everything is above board. Because remember, from the bank side, they can't take risks and be deemed to have lent recklessly. And they know life happens, obviously death as part of that happens, but similarly so, they still need to focus on ensuring that their compliance is in place.
So Christian, if I can just add to that as well, what Stokvels can also do, or whether it's a company or a trust, whatever the case might, whatever you set up your entity in, is that you can take out life insurance or life cover for your member, you know, to say, or for the director or for shareholder, whatever the case might be, if you're relying on them either for surety or for their contributions for the sustainability of the company. So should they then pass on, that life cover then pays out to the company. So that's something else that that Stokvels could look at, actually insuring their members so that when the payouts for the life cover it pays into the actual entity that is listed as a beneficiary.
And I think just to add on what Lee just said, it's what we call key man policy. And the beauty is that should that person die, that payout is not actually going to be part of the estate. So they shouldn't be worried about an estate duty. It's exempted from estate duty from tax planning point of view. So you're covered. So as long as it gets paid out into the Stokvel structure to pay you out, then that's fine. That's key man policy. I saw Bruno raise the hand around this question. Maybe he's gonna close that. Once he closed that, and then I'm gonna go to Retabile. After Retabile, Nandipa Basani and Tsepo. I saw Heron. I'm not sure if he took his hands down. Bruno?
Sorry, I think my hand's just still up from when I was asking you to unmute me. So you can go to Retabile.
Ah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Retabile, I see that Bruno respects you so much that he doesn't even want to talk. Okay, let me unmute you. There we go.
Thank you, Chilwell, for unmuting me. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I think my question will be directed, I think, in more maybe to Christian and also Bruno. It's a diverse question. But number one, we have got a Stokvel, we are 10, and then we decided to use a vehicle of opening up a company whereby all members of that Stokvel are shareholders, and then it's 4 directors, right? So the challenge here is because of lack of understanding, we thought that we can use the company to go and apply for financing. The company acting as a juristic person, maybe the bank assessing the company, because our thought was that our monthly contribution from the Stokvel will be invested into the company on a monthly basis, such that it can build up a financial record for the company itself. Thinking that if you go and approach the bank or any financier, we'll be able to qualify for a loan, maybe for 2 properties or 3, whatever it might be. That's the first one. And then maybe Christian can advise us whether that is possible.
Sorry, Tabile.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, shall I answer that one and then you ask the second one? Or...
No, go on. Thanks.
So looking at that, remember the members' contributions in effect as shareholders, there lies as the shareholders' loan. Otherwise, it would be taxable trading income, and that would also be detrimental to the value of your contributions. On the bank's side, they will look at the directors to provide repayment ability. You're welcome to reach out to me via Shalibu, and I can assist you with pre-qualifying the 4 directors that are there, maybe also the other 6 shareholders, and we can have a look at who has the greatest bondability. And then based on that, maybe restructure and have 1, 2, or 3, or still maybe 4 people act as directors and let them apply for the financing in the name of the company. Because remember, that company is not trading. So their salaries have to provide repayment ability, and all the contributions will then go towards deposit, acquisition costs, maintenance, provision for vacancy, and all of that.
Okay, thanks.
Ask the second question. Christian, do you mind if sharing your details on the chat box? Thank you.
Yeah, gladly.
Thank
you. Yeah, the last one is one that I think the other ones that I was going to ask, I think I'll reach out to him again on when we chat privately and maybe invite him to join.
No,
yes.
Rather ask so that everyone can benefit, please.
Oh, okay.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't mind that much. I think it's just there. But let me ask the other one. In terms of the Stokvel that is now financing the company, how do I go about legalizing that? I think Usti mentioned those aspects of whereby members, the Stokvel that we have, I don't have a feel that is legalized. It's just a constitution, and then no one signed. I also maybe would like an advice on how do we legalize that, because we have got so many clauses in that constitution of the Stokvel. Like for instance, members exiting early, voluntarily, they lose 20% of their contribution. Second one, if maybe they lose their jobs, become more lenient and stuff like that. But I'm scared that one day one member will say, no, I want all my contributions, even if they don't have interest, because I don't respect your clause of voluntary leaving. Thanks.
Slee, do you want to briefly maybe advise him? And I think it's more legal, and it might be a loaded question, which Bruno might want to share his details so that he can take it off chat. But then let's give a high-level answer, and then Bruno, just so that you assist him, please also share your details to him under the chat, and then also. What's his name? Ritabile, please reach out so that Bruno can assist you. And then Slee, do you want to just jump into it? And then Nandipa, you'll come after. If Bruno doesn't have what do you call answering a comment after Slee, then Nandipa can come in.
Okay, sure. This one is I think it's more of a management thing, right? Ratabile, because you put a constitution in place and you say these are the rules of engagement. And when people join the Stokvel, they understand that these are the rules of engagement. But life happens, like what happened with us with COVID. Like nobody foresaw COVID coming, right? So now we have members who have lost their jobs. They are desperate. They need their money. And they reached out to me and said, Cindy, like, can I get my money? And I said, I wish I could, but I can't. It's not there for me to give it to you. It's not sitting under my mattress for me to pull it out and give it to you. So it's a matter of just managing those relationships and managing it in a way that they understand the situation that you're in. If you've bought a property and the money is sitting in the bricks and the cement and the windows and the doors, there's nothing you can do except maybe refinancing it, and then that's a different story for another day. But you need to plan for such things. Maybe have a certain amount in reserve to say we're always going to have so much available cash should somebody want to exit, and then we penalize them, whatever. So I'm saying that's more of how do you actually then manage it, because having the contract and having it there doesn't mean that life won't happen and people won't be desperate and really need the money. So you now need to manage those relationships. Like I said to you, that in some instances, it's better to have a member go for the sake of peace and cohesiveness of the group than to insist on keeping to say, hey, you are not going to have your money, because then that member is going to be disruptive and they're going to cause havoc. So sometimes it may be better to cut your losses and give them their money and let them go. But ultimately, it's a management thing, like I said.
And to build on what Silindile was saying, the reality behind it is the management thing. What we need to do is we need to effectively contract for it. So a constitution that exists, even if it's not in a formal setting like a company, it's still binding because people have come into it, they've agreed to it, they know what they're getting into. So they're contributing. So they can't later argue that, oh no, but you signed it, you agreed to it, it's done. Even if they didn't sign it, I mean, in law, they kept contributing towards it. So they did actually agree to it. It doesn't have to be a signed document. So at a very basic fundamental level, as long as it's properly set out, what you don't want is confusion. You don't want the Stokvel to have been created by a conversation around a braai, and then one day the guy goes to your house, knocks on the door and says, okay, you're going to give me your 10,000 Rand this week, because no one knows what's supposed to be done with it. You have a guy walking around with a couple of bucks and we don't understand what the use of this is. And that's obviously a very extreme example, but the reality is you don't want a constitution that's like one page, doesn't say anything, because then obviously when that Stokvel wants to go invest in something, all the members are going to come out and fight it because they don't want to invest in that one thing. They want to invest in something else. So again, it comes down to the management, transparency, and the ability to record this somewhere so that there's no confusion later. You need to make sure that it's there. So legalized, it's legalized. Just make sure that it's clear as day and unambiguous.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Guys, the contact details for all our panelists are on the chat box, so utilize them. This is a platform for you to be empowered as property investors. Please take advantage of that. And someone asked if there's a brochure for Stokvel. I think, Slee, you shared your, website details. They can check on the Sakisizwe Stokvel, and then they can get a brochure and interact with Lee and can assist them. Nandipa, let me unmute you, my sister. There we go. Nandipa, you're unmuted. Okay, let's go to Basani.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Nandipa, yes. Okay, Basani will come to you after Nandipa. Don't mute yourself. Okay, right. Nandipa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just have actually two questions. I'm part of a property Stokvel and we contribute 2,500 per month. Now, I wanted to, yes, we have structures in place, the constitution and how the management of the whole Stokvel is managed. Now, my question, the first one is, let's talk the issue of exit, voluntarily exit. our clause states that you can exit after 5 years of joining, if, for an example, along the way you are unable to contribute. So one thing I would like to get clarity on is that, is it possible that when you exit voluntarily, will your money that is being paid out after 5 years, does it constitute, when does it start, when does it end, and how is that calculated? And then the second question is, if, for an example, as a member of the Stokvel, I have a will, and in my will I indicate that if I pass away, I would like my beneficiaries to continue with the contributing and participating in the Stokvel, is that allowed? Those are my questions. Thanks.
Wow, that's why this platform is called group consultation. And yeah, guys, I'm impressed. Who wanna go first? Bruno, you raised your hand.
No, I'm saying I can do it. Silindile, do you want to take a shot?
No, go ahead. Let's go.
So that the one around the exit, around how it's calculated, it really depends on what's your model of your Stokvel, and when does it move from being, as Christian was saying, it being a loan to the business and then converting that loan into equity. So it really depends on how you've structured it and how the actual model for your Stokvel. So for those 5 years, so when you're doing your books, what do you record that contribution as? So that would really differ. And then the rules around exit and then nominating your beneficiary. So it will depend on the constitution of the Stokvel. Most constitutions that I've seen don't allow that, because you'll find that maybe it's a lady's Stokvel, then all of a sudden we have your husband joining as a member, and we don't want that. So most constitutions that I've seen usually say that when you pass away, your beneficiaries do not automatically become members of the Stokvel, but they can, depending if the members accept them and if they meet the criteria of the Stokvel. So if, for example, you say it's a Stokvel for, assuming, Black ladies, and you're married to a guy, then if we feel that your husband is going to be bringing skills that we need in the group, we may just agree to bypass that law and say we need him as part of our Stokvel, so we'll accept him. So it depends on what does your Stokvel constitution say.
I agree. I concur.
Wow. I didn't expect that. Come on, Bruno.
Well, I can elaborate, but then I'm just waffling. She said it. It's concise. It's to the point. It's true. It's there. It's
Christian.
There's nothing that I can add to that. I mean,
there we go.
Looking at my screen, I'm in between the two Stokvel experts. So.
Okay, let's go to Basani. Hi, Basani.
Hi, evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm unmuted.
Loud and clear.
Oh. Okay, thank you. This concept of property Stokvel is new to me, so I just need a bit of clarity from Silindile on how actually it works. So you've established a trust. Have you established a trust there, and then do you buy houses cash or monthly contribution to the house? How does it actually work, and do you get dividends monthly on the house?
It's a bit of a long conversation to get into, but how we've been operating for the past year has been purely as a Stokvel, no entity, no trust, no company, no nothing. We've just been able to operate as a Stokvel because based on the type of investments that they do, they allow us to be able to operate as purely as a Stokvel, because we're merely raising finance, for property, invest for a separate company that does the actual investment, and then in return we then get money interest, but now we're moving to the phase where now we're starting to actually look process of registering a trust where the properties will actually sit and the members of the Stokvel will become beneficiaries of that trust.
That's a growth path. Interesting. All the best. I hope I'll see you in the consultation room.
Yes.
You're unmuted.
Hi. Okay, thanks, Chili Boy and your guests, and good evening to everyone else. I just got a question on the Stokvel. As to ask, what's the best business model for Stokvel? I mean, looking at the tax implications and the liability implications. Now, on the liability implications, I also want to find out that, will the members always be jointly and severally liable for whatever that if the Stokvel forms a company to do the whole property thing? So now, will the members automatically be jointly and severally liable for whatever that the company might have? So yeah, that's my question.
Cool. So I suppose, so again, it comes down to how the Stokvel is designed. Joint and several liability in our law arises especially when it comes to like associations and partnerships. So if it's a normal informal Stokvel, just with the constitution created for profit, the problem is that it's a group of people that are agreeing that they're going to contract together to achieve some kind of result. And that's very dangerous. And that's why I don't like that type of structure. So again, what Silindile did was, listen, you know what, we'll create that informal Stokvel, but we're not going to let that Stokvel go out and do things, because that's where the risk happens. And that's where the indecision happens, because you have so many people under one umbrella. So all that happened was they created the Stokvel, but with one singular purpose. And that purpose is to contribute money towards a company that invests in property. And that company then has an obligation to the Stokvel to return the money and pay profits and all the rest. So to answer your question, so far as the joint and several liability goes, if you do it in a Stokvel and you try actually trade in the name of the Stokvel, you're going to struggle because it's joint and several. You're not going to get finance from a bank because you're not a formal association for all intents and purposes. You won't even be able to own assets to the greatest degree. What you'd want is either to follow a model where the money's put in a company, or you just want to take all the contributors, make them shareholders in the company, bring it all together and use the company to invest. In that instance, you wouldn't be jointly and severally liable because the company trades in its own name, the company has its own personality, the company incurs debt. However, going back to what Christian said, if you go to the bank and you apply for a loan, then it's a different story, because then the bank makes the directors sign as sureties. So there the personal liability comes back into the picture and needs to be considered.
Thank you so much, guys. We pretty much run out of time, and then I'll take the last 3 questions and we're closing. And it's been a very great night. I see Heron that raised the hand. I just want to take him and retire it, then I'll be closing. Okay, the last one, Mpumelo. 3 questions, I'm done, and then we'll make the what do you call, the recording available to you guys who attended, and also the panelists that requested. Heron, is it my installment sales agreement friend? Let me unmute him. Is it him?
Yes, hi. Thank you, everyone. This is really informative. Thanks for the session. Yes, so my question is, my understanding of a Stokvel is basically just an agreement that people will contribute towards something. But if you say it's a traditional Stokvel, then my understanding is that, let's say there's 12 people, that the 12 people will contribute and one of the 12 will receive the money. But with what, like Bruno said, if this Stokvel wants to buy property, then you have to put that money from the Stokvel into the company. The company then buys the property. So my actual question is just this: can a Stokvel in itself, without having a company or a trust, have a bank account? And can that Stokvel then buy property from the bank account of the Stokvel, or the moment, or do you always have to have a company that actually buys the property? I don't know if that makes sense.
I can answer that quickly, Heron. So a Stokvel can have a bank account. It's called a Stokvel account. Like you can go to FNB or Standard Bank, whatever, and open a Stokvel account. They'll normally want like 3 people who will come and open it. And then when they need to withdraw, they need to go to the bank, blah, blah, blah. So that's possible. But in terms of actually then buying the property as a Stokvel, that's not possible. So you need to register either as a company or as a trust to be able to purchase the property.
Okay, and then the question is, what is the minimum amount of people that can join a Stokvel?
I would say 2. Just takes one other person.
But do we, I mean, you introduced, well, I was introduced as the installment sale guy, but what I'm seeing is a big opportunity is if we can bring people into a Stokvel, they then put the money from the Stokvel into a company. That company don't have to apply for bonds. We use the installment sale method, and you just attach the small difference from the Stokvel, and you don't have to apply for finance. You can do owner finance with installment sales. Now you can scale this thing to anything.
Yeah.
Call me,
Incredible.
Heron. Let's talk.
Heron,
absolutely right.
so is it Bruno? Bruno, you wanted to say something before you say something? Heron,
Yes, sir.
I'm challenging you in the platform that in 2 weeks' time, I want you here. I want Slee, after that call that she say you must give a call. And I want that model there. Let's have a conversation. I want Christian back. I want Bruno back, because now it all ties it up, and we're closing the session of property financing, because it started with the banking finance Stokvel model. Now I've got my good friend Heron with the installment sales agreement. Now let's see the whole 360 degree. Are you in, Heron? You are in front of 68 people. You are not dropping me.
If this group
No
of
pressure.
people can work together, we can build a big future for the people on this call.
I'll call you tomorrow. Then we'll set up.
Thank you, sir.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
In any case, Silindile and Heron, I messaged your respective numbers to each other.
Oh, there we go.
Wow. Sure.
You see, that's why we call this thing group networking consultation. Okay, guys, we are done. Or Bruno, you wanted to say something?
No, I was agreeing with Heron. It's like absolutely right. It's the combination of the two is very powerful.
Exactly. So yeah, guys, in the interest of time, thank you so much for joining me tonight. You already heard I put Heron on the spotlight that he's joining me in 2 weeks' time. Heron, you don't say no to the group of 68 people. So yeah, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be closing up the session of property financing. It's the last session. Maybe we'll be talking installment sales agreement if Heron Diary allows. And then join me, and then hopefully the other participant will also join me back in 2 weeks' time, and then we close the session around structuring the whole property finance. We spoke about bank finance. You can, if you want the link to the videos about bank finance where we had Christian as the key guy, then you can access that. We spoke about Stokvel today, and then we want to close around installment sales agreement. That will potentially have covered how you can ultimately finance your property venture. And then going forward, also be on a lookout, especially on the week where we're going to be speaking about Wheels Week. We might potentially be speaking about how, as a property investor, you need to ensure that your wheels are drafted efficiently. I've got a very brilliant mind by the name of Bruce. So he's a very excellent attorney. So we will definitely look into that, and I'll look at the tech side of things on how you need to structure your will in such a way that you, and as the duty is not an issue for you as a wealth creator, you focus on creating wealth, and we focus in preserving and transfer wealth from generations to generation. In that said, thank you so much. I'm out. Have a good one. Please still obey the regulations and wash your hands and sanitize and wear the mask, see each other. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Good night.
Thanks so much, Shitty Boy.
Cheers,
Cheers, everyone.
everyone.
Yes.